Greetings. My name is Dr. Monica Moody Moore, and welcome to this week's episode of Pivot on Purpose. Today's topic and focus will be on prepping for your pivot. So let's get comfortable. Let's get in the mind space that allows us to do deep dive work into our own ambitions and motivations and see if we can get things moving along for ourselves. So, with the focus on prepping for your pivot, immediately we need to go into a reflective state. In order to get geared up and ready to go, similar to on your mark, get set, go, our prepping conversation today will focus on getting on your mark and then getting set so that we can ultimately launch. There's three things in particular I would like for us to focus on today. And you can tell me if you can think of others. So go ahead and use the comment section below and grant me, if you're willing, some of your best advice on how you prep for your pivot. But from my suggestion today, there's three areas that I see over and over again that some of my executive clients stumble with or have challenges with. That is to be radically clear on what you most want. That was even hard for me to say. Radically clear on what you most want. So often we're clear on what we don't want, and we can give a laundry list of those things. I don't want this. I don't want that. But when it comes time to what we do want in clearly articulated ways, sometimes we struggle. So your first things first is to specifically and strategically identify what areas of your life and career you most want to pivot toward. So be truthful with yourself. That's always your first intent, to be as open-minded and willing to give yourself grace so that you can remove those guardrails. Just think, so much of life is peppered by guardrails. Don't touch this, don't do that, don't go here, you can't do that. So now you really have to give yourself permission. I know it's strange to even think about giving yourself permission to be free flowing with your own ideas and intentions for yourself and your life going forward. So get radically clear with what you most want. Step number one. Able to do that? And I also want to hear your advice. So please do use the comment section to let me know what you believe are the most advantageous things to do. You also want to audit and align your brand. Now, another segment I did is on building your personal leadership brand. That's in my playlist, so I'll make sure I refer you to that. Do take a look at building your own personal leadership brand. But let's hone in on this thought here first, to align and audit your brand. So first you have to try to understand, what is your current brand and what does it need to be optimally effective in what you're trying to pivot toward. So I need you to take an inventory for yourself in the best ways you know how. Typically that includes not only what you think, but somewhat a 360 perspective of how others receive and perceive you. So having a sense of what your brand is, and then seeing how it aligns with what you're trying to pivot toward. In a moment, I'll give you a few examples, somewhat from my own personal life, but also from the executive clients that I have the privilege of connecting with as well. Of course, without names, I'll just share some scenarios for you to consider in terms of alignment. As you do your own deep work, however, build your personal brand, do look at that video if it helps you get in position for that work. But think about what's most desirous of the person in the role or in whatever type of life or lifestyle you want to live. So what are some of the attributes that would be necessary for you to get in position to do that type of pivot? Try to think holistically about positioning yourself for that type of new venture. And then what do you need to do to position yourself? So before getting a position directly, you may have to position yourself. That just means alignment, making yourself available on the end cap, so to speak, so that you can be visible and aligned with what's most advantageous for the next role. Don't worry, I know I'm using a lot of, free-flowing words here. I'll give some examples to bring this all to light as we go forward. The last piece of the 3-point or three-legged stool is the strategic relationships. In my mind, relationships, particularly for senior level roles, are essential for the next pivot. People are not just hiring based on your compulsory skills. They're also hiring based on, sometimes it's likability, sometimes it's charisma, sometimes it's perception of the person's ability to get things done, but the relationships do matter. So in prepping for your pivot, contemplate your relationships, the ones you already have, the ones that may need to be strengthened, and the ones you need to build. I also have a video on networking and creating relationships that stick. I encourage you to look at that in my playlist as well. So if the 3 attributes to simply get ready to pivot, I need you to get radically clear on what you do want. I need you to audit and align your personal brand. And then lastly, let's make sure you're thinking about strategic relationships so that you can leverage and create networked opportunities for yourself. The 3 key components of prepping for your pivot. Now, these things are all easier said than done. And earlier I said I would give you some examples so that you could do this work yourself more fully. If I'm working in the finance area, and yet I'm very desirous of working in the nonprofit space, perhaps using my finance skills for sure, but I also want to parlay them over to another industry altogether. Let's say higher education, and I worked in banking at one of the commercial banks, and I want to pivot into education because I believe that that's aligned with my purpose and my mission and my intent. For an example, how can I go about using what I've just explained to do that work? Well, first I have to be clear. Do I really want to pivot out of a commercial finance role into a nonprofit space? Look at the pros and cons of the pivot. What do I have for my previous role that the new role might want or benefit from? What relationships do I already have that I can utilize so that I can get in position to make the pivot? How am I preparing myself already? This is all prior to applying, interviewing, having any type of job offer. I'm really doing a deep dive in my own why so that I can fully understand my motivations and put myself in the best posture possible as I go about my pivot. So be clear about why you're trying to do it. If you don't tell the truth to anyone else, and I hope you do, you certainly want to start by telling the truth to yourself. So become radically clear. And I'm trying to use an example going from one industry to the next, still within the same functional area like finance, but from different industries like the commercial banking over to nonprofit. And there are a million different examples that I could give in this situation. But think of your own as you think about where you want to pivot to next. Remember, I encourage you to think of audit and align your brand. Well, one is if you've never thought about your brand, you have to get started there first. But then how to build the brand. Again, that's something I go through in another video. But for the purposes of this conversation, I want you to hone in on where your strengths not only are, but where you feel the most flow. And what I mean by the use of that word is, where does it seem a little more effortless? Meaning you can do it a little more easily. It doesn't necessarily suggest your eyes closed and one hand behind your back, but what are some of the things that you do that when you do them, you know you're in your best place of self because you feel so aligned? Examples I could give, but that doesn't matter. It's more about where you find that alignment. So I encourage you to do that work and look at where you feel the most alive, the most centered, and have the most strategic alignment naturally. Now, we don't always just get to do that work that brings us the most joy. Sometimes even other parts of the work that we like the least still have to be done. So while it's not just about joy and fulfillment, I do like to start there because it gives us a place to go in terms of overall fulfillment. Where are some of those options and opportunities that you can align yourself to that already bring you a good sense of satisfaction. For me, it's helping others achieve and realize their goals. So I'm constantly putting myself in alignment with being a catalyst or a connector to help others get where they're going. I find that's quite natural for me as a person of good intention and with empathy and desire and a whole lot of motivation and compassion to help others get where they're going. But enough about me, let's focus on you. What does your personal leadership audit say about your leadership brand, and where do you find the most alignment? The last point is really the most important somewhat. It's about your relationships. Relationships matter. Sometimes, particularly in the US culture, and that's where I'm filming this video, we're very much associated with, I can do this, I'm very self-empowered, I'm very able on my own. I'm not making any complete, generalizations about who you are. You are free to make that choice. But in terms of culturally speaking, and you may be watching this from another environment altogether, trying to think of where your relationships are the strongest, the ones that are already intact, but also think of the relationships you need to strengthen. Just because you know someone doesn't mean that they know you well enough to sponsor you or to underwrite or to support your journey. So again, think about relationships you may need to further develop. And there may be relationships you don't have yet. So in my video on networking, I speak about connecting dots, not only the ones that are right in front of you, but perhaps some that are a few levels or layers removed. So as you get ready to pivot on purpose, there is a bit of prep work that has to go into it. Being clear is the first step, and I say radically clear with yourself first. Be a truth teller to you in terms of what brings you the most satisfaction and joy, and where and why you want to make this pivot and alignment. Think about your audit of your own alignment already. Where's your brand already aligned? Where can you see elements of your strengths being used in your day-to-day work? And then where must you reimagine yourself? If I'm looking to make myself a thought leader, I may find it very helpful to comment on others' posts or to lean into other examples of knowledge sharing that I can use, being on advisory boards, etc. I'm just using examples from my life to further stir your thinking around things that can be most helpful for you. So as you do this work, go into the alignment also on your personal brand to see where you need to strengthen that piece. And then the relationships that I spoke about, to hone in on those, to build the ones that are most necessary and advantageous, is the last piece of this. So to get ready to do this work, I'm with you every step of the way. I say we pivot on purpose, we pivot with intent, and we get started now. Thanks for listening, and welcome again to this week's episode. Share, comment, and please do subscribe. It helps to ensure that we reach as many people as possible, that we can learn and grow together.